I think it's really helpful if they've kind of walked the walk, because 90% of the time I am dealing with the spouse or the partner. We have brought closings up to the hospital in between surgeries for people to close. You need to have somebody that knows the way that this process would work and have the great resources specific for the physicians.
Welcome to the Doctor's Eyes Only podcast, brought to you by Vestia Personal Wealth Advisors, where we are on a mission to help the highest caliber physicians achieve wealth that matters. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Doctor's Eyes Only podcast. I'm Lauren Oschman, and today we are going to talk about real estate decisions as a physician. So I'm here today. My guest is Amanda Barron. She is a realtor who's local to me here in Nashville. And what I love about Amanda, the reason I'm really excited about this conversation is because she herself is actually married to medicine. And so she knows what it's like to relocate for a spouse's job. She knows what it's like to relocate as a physician family after going through a relocation from Texas to Tennessee, not knowing Nashville in advance, so that her husband could take a job at one of the hospitals here, and going through that herself. She decided to get into real estate because knowing that a lot of times when physician families are kind of moving outside of your own choice, you don't know anything about the area that you're moving to, and you need to get plugged into a community, and you need to find schools, restaurants, hairdressers, dentists, nail salons, shopping, all of those kinds of things. So very excited to have Amanda here today so that we can talk about real estate as a physician. Welcome, Amanda.
Thanks for having me, Lauren. I'm super excited to be here.
Same. And I know you actually just launched a podcast yourself, which I'll just plug here so I don't forget. So it's called Behind the White Coat, right? And you're kind of talking about like issues that are important to physician spouses and having some of those really important conversations.
Yep, exactly. It was basically all the things I didn't know and I wished I would have known. So for lack of a better term, it is kind of a resource and support for physician spouses, physician partners, and just a lot of great topics that I did not know anything about and needed to know.
I love that so much. Definitely encourage, especially physician spouses who are listening, check out Amanda's show because she has the perspective of being a physician spouse herself.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Of course. So maybe let's just start with I gave a little bit in kind of my background of how you found your way here, just the connection as a physician spouse. But there are thousands of physician spouses who have gone through kind of the journey with a physician and, kind of been along for the ride, so to speak, and been so supportive of that physician journey. And not all of them end up deciding that they're going to put themselves into actually paying it forward and helping other physician spouses. So maybe tell us a little bit about how did this come about?
Yeah, honestly, it came about organically. When we moved here, which is hard to say, 19 years ago for my husband's residency, dating myself a little bit. I had a 6-month-old baby, decided I was going to stay home, and I didn't know really anybody. I had one friend who definitely helped, but she moved away shortly after. And so in full honesty, I was lonely. He was gone all the time. He was gone with holidays. He was gone for birthdays and just needed support, needed connection, and I didn't have it. So fast forward, decided to get my real estate license because I found that there was a need for this, not only to help people relocate, but especially a lot of it is from out of state remotely. And I noticed that they needed these connections more than anything. And then the real estate kind of came afterwards. So for me, it is connecting to the community, having them find support. Their, emergency contact can't come help them if they are on the side of the road. So I have a ton of clients that put me as their kids' emergency contact until they meet people. And so it was just, it was a need for things. And now we support each other for, sickness and new babies and all the things that I didn't have and wished I would have had. And that was kind of how it evolved. And the real estate kind of was secondhand after the connection.
Yeah, that's, a lot of longtime listeners of our show know that my dad is an interventional cardiologist. And so he was very unreliable from being able to be there at the side of the road kind of situation. And so I can only imagine what now that I have young kids myself and I'm trying to navigate all of these things and the curveballs that get thrown into kind of the everyday with kids, that I'm able to look back and be like, how was my mom doing this? Because she was a single parent for a lot of the day to day, because she didn't have that spouse that she could call and be like, hey, I need you to come help us, or, I need you to be flexible around this, or I need to take so-and-so to the doctor. It was like, if one of us had to do something, we were all going. And I'm one of four. And so I can only imagine what having someone who gets it so early in that journey must mean to the families that you're helping.
Yeah, it is comforting, and it's all the things I wished I would have had. And I think, you know, knowing somebody is here with your best interest at heart outside of real estate, but genuinely understanding what you're walking through, I think is an instant relief.
Well, yeah, because I'm thinking, like, how many times do you help a spouse buy a house that the physician maybe hasn't even seen and is going to see once they move into it? I mean, I know growing up, that was not an uncommon experience for our family. And so I imagine that's something most realtors would be like very thrown off by. And you're like, I get it. Like, what can we do to involve the physician as much as he or she wants to be, but then also give you what you need? Because realistically, the spouse is going to be doing a lot of the logisticking of some of these things.
Yep, I totally agree.
Awesome. So I guess help me understand, because like our physician clients who are listening, or, physician audience is going to understand this because they've walked this, but what are the things that maybe you're able to help families think about understanding the physician family perspective that a typical home buyer might not have top of mind?
So I think for me, most of my clients are from out of state. And like you were talking about, a lot of them do the home process remotely. So I teach them from the comfort of their home things that they can do from their house to actually look here in Nashville, even though I am their boots on the ground, but also think of things outside of that. So not just the house, but what's the internet connection like there? When you're on call, you need to make sure you've got great internet connection. Are there multiple ways for you to get into the hospital? Because we know on an icy weekend, not all our roads are properly salted and plowed. Are you on a hill? Do you have an all-wheel drive? So we talk about all of these things outside of just normal real estate, your commute time, because you've got to get in for an emergency. And we look at that all different times of days. And so not only with that, but then, like I said, all the resources that they potentially may need that are physician based as well. A financial planner, an estate planning. So I connect them with all of those that specifically work with physicians and know how their lifestyle is, know their finances, know that if they're in training, what it's going to look like 10 years from now, and just help them through all of that process and not be done serving them just at the end of their real estate transaction.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm even thinking, just from my experience, like I obviously don't get into the real estate, but in the finance side of things, a lot of realtors maybe don't know that there are specific physician loan products available out there. Right. And so I'll oftentimes have clients who send over to me like, oh, hey, here's the lender that my realtor recommended. And I happen to know, because obviously, we have clients in 46 states around the country. And so we have really good connections with different lenders that are doing things for physicians. And so I happen to know that there's something better out there that's only available to them because they're a physician that we're able to help them look into. Mm-hmm. Obviously, if their realtor knew that, then they would be able to, like, they wouldn't need to kind of, run around or have wasted time maybe talking to someone who we knew from the get-go didn't necessarily have the best solution for them.
I agree. And I think having that knowledge of how that process works, how that loan process works in that platform. And a prime example, I had a physician couple moving in town. They were buying new construction. And of course, the builder's like, we'll use our lender because we give certain incentives, but they didn't offer a physician loan. So I had to have a conversation with them and their lender to say, here's what they're using and why. But it's not fair for them to not be able to get your incentives because you don't offer this loan. And so explaining everything to them, not only were they able to use their physician lender, we still get all the incentives without using.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yes. So you've got
That's a huge win. I love that. Well, and just for those who are listening who may not know, because I get this question, I'm sure you get this question too, where it's like, is a physician loan really something that I should be looking for? Is that
Right.
something that I need? Is there, are there like hidden things in that?
Yeah.
And so generally speaking, if you buy a home and you don't have a 20% down payment for that home, you're going to have to pay extra fees because the bank is going to want you to have that mortgage essentially insured. Because if you were to default on that loan, they wouldn't have the assurance that they could sell the house for enough to pay themselves back.
Correct.
And so they'll charge you an insurance premium for that. Well, for physicians, because incomes are usually really strong with physicians, cash flow is really dependable. Physician jobs are very stable. Most banks also kind of being understanding of like a physician coming out of training doesn't have a 20% down payment because it's a victory to make it out of residency or fellowship without like credit card debt, let alone with enough savings to buy a house.
Correct.
And so there are banks that have created specific loans for physicians that allow for lower than normal down payments, sometimes 0%. Like sometimes you don't have to put anything down. You'll still get a competitive interest rate and you don't have to pay that extra fee for private mortgage insurance. Whereas almost any other lender is either going to put a different, like a 2-loan package together. And so it's going to end up costing you more in interest, or they're going to charge you that private mortgage insurance that we can avoid with a physician loan. So I think knowing that, and I love that story where you were actually able to get them the best of both. It's like, let's get the incentives and the physician loan. That family had to have been overjoyed with that result.
We built our firm around one goal, helping physicians achieve wealth that matters. Time with your family, freedom in your schedule, and confidence in your decisions. Not sure how you're doing today? Head to vestiaadvisors.com/DEO, that's DEO for Doctor's Eyes Only, to take our 3-minute physician wealth checkup and get a snapshot of where you stand today and what to do next.
Yeah. And I think you don't know what you don't know. So the more you educate yourself, the more you're able to educate them. And I actually have a lender that does physician loans and they do 102%. So we can roll some closing costs in it as well.
Even better. Yeah. So I think my brain then goes to kind of the cash flow of the whole thing, because physician loans used to be pretty easy to use with low down payments because interest rates just a couple of years ago were in the 3% range. And so when we started thinking about the monthly payments with lower down payments, it was still something that physician cash flow could handle. Also, when we thought about opportunity cost of the money, so if a doctor did have a couple $100,000 that they could have put down on a house, it might have made better sense to pay off student loans or put that into the stock market or something like that, because the interest rate on their mortgage was going to be so low compared to the cost of those other things. I mean, fast forward to now, mid 2025, that's all changed because interest rates have over doubled in a relatively short amount of time. So if we're thinking about kind of your experience, really like boots on the ground, helping physicians buy homes now, what are the things that you're talking to people about, really just thinking about like the requirements list of needing to be within a certain vicinity of the hospital, needing to have enough room for your family and, potentially to grow into, and then also just knowing that interest rates are a real consideration when it comes to cash flow in all of this?
Yeah. So I think it's a great question. And one of the things I talk to every one of my clients, no matter if they are a resident, no matter if they are an attending, if they are retired, what's your goal? What is your overall goal when it comes to real estate? Are you wanting a place that you feel comfortable in during your training? And then once you're done with training, you are selling it and moving on. You're moving up. Are you planning to stay around for a few years? Because I feel in the Nashville market, if you're going to be here for 4 years or longer, it is beneficial for you to invest in real estate, have some equity, and then potentially whatever happens with your training or your job, you may hold on to that for passive income and then rent it out to the incoming residents and fellows. It is a very lucrative revolving door because they want to be right where you were. They need to be in the same vicinity, the same commute times. And so that's a conversation that we have. And then depending on their answer, that trickles into the advice that I give them when it comes to, interest rates or potentially charging rent, how much rent, and is this going to be a lucrative thing for you? And so that kind of guides our conversation when it comes to their future and interest rates and what that's going to look like.
That makes a ton of sense. I love the idea of starting with the goal. Like, what is your goal in buying real estate? Because then you can work your way backwards to figure out what the best way to accomplish that goal is. And it may be, to your point, I love that. Like, if you're thinking of being here for more than 4 years, buying probably makes sense. Obviously, you know the Nashville market. So talking to someone who knows that local market, who can kind of give you like, what's that tipping point based on what we normally see in appreciation in this area. I always remember I had this doctor that I worked with. This was maybe a decade ago. And the first job that she took out of training just didn't work. They didn't like the area. They didn't have family there. She didn't like the job. So there was really nothing redeeming that she was like, I have to get out of here. And they had bought a house. And this was before real estate had really boomed in a lot of areas. It was still kind of coming out of 2008. And so, there were other things going on there, but they actually had to take out a loan to cover the closing costs to sell that house and move to an area where that was going to be a better fit for their family and a better job, because they had done 100% physician loan and there had not been any appreciation on that property in the year and a half or so that they lived there. So they just didn't have enough time. They hadn't really paid down any principal yet, because the way a mortgage works, you pay mostly interest in the beginning. And so I usually say, regardless of the market, from the financial perspective, it's around 5 years. Now you're right, Nashville is a hotter real estate market. And so in Nashville, that might be shorter. In other areas, it might be longer. But around 5 years, if you look at just how a mortgage works, that's when you, in most cases, will actually, from a physician loan, start building some equity where you won't have to potentially pay to get out of that house if you're not going to be able to keep it out and rent it or, whatever. So I think that's a great way to think about it, is what is that goal? And then let's make sure that we get you set up so that you're in a good position to accomplish that goal, even if that's potentially renting during training when you would otherwise, like, you think you should own something, but renting might be better considering your goals.
I totally agree. And I think not only price point, but location makes a big difference as well. In what makes sense to them financially, what could potentially come back to them if they chose to rent it, or their equity. So those are questions that I also ask them, and things that we discussed, and come up with a game plan that would meet their needs.
Well, and sometimes the place that you would want to buy is not necessarily something that's going to provide a good return if you were to rent it out. And so I think that can be two different things too. If you think, well, ultimately, I would like to collect some real estate and maybe have a little portfolio of passive income, that might actually be a purchase that's not the place you'd want to live, because you have to make sure that there's a profit in that cash flow and that you've baked in like potential vacancy costs and turnover of tenants, or, the HVAC needs replaced. I mean, you have to cover all of those costs. And so you have to budget for all of that when you're running these numbers.
Yep. I completely agree. And so the numbers have to make sense. So again, I think the initial question of what's your goal and your time frame dictate all of that.
Now, I'm curious to get from your perspective, because again, this has nothing to do with finance, and my area is finance, but it strikes me that so much of making a real estate decision is really community. And you kind of talked about this in the beginning. So how do you, obviously if people are working with you, you're able to help them kind of navigate this, but what are questions that people should be asking, or things that people should be looking for when they're looking to relocate, so that they make sure not only do they get into a house that they like, but also into a community that they like and are going to find support in?
Yeah. So those are when your real estate agent's got to ask the right questions. So for me, it's always, what is important for you in a community? Because it's different for everybody. It could be access to various things. It could be your commute time to various things. It could be amenities. It could be that it's what's the walkability. It could be schools. Like, there are so many extenuating circumstances. So that's the first question that I do ask, is what is important for you in a community. The other thing that I feel like they need to then be able to look into is, what's their comfort level of stuff? So safety, schools and what are you needing in a school? When people say, I want to be in a great school, well, yeah, you can look at ratings, but that is basically standardized testing. And everybody is different. I was not a great test taker. And I feel like every district, even more specific schools, are known for various things. Maybe for their sports, maybe for their special ed department, maybe because they're the only one that offers fine arts or an agricultural program, and you only know your kids. So, a big thing that I tell people when you are relocating and you don't know an area, your schools, if you have kids, are really going to dictate that area. So before they actually pick an area or pick a neighborhood, I encourage them to go and tour schools and look at how those dynamics look. The kids interacting with parents, the kids interacting with administration. How are the adults interacting with each other? Is it important for you to have summer programs, before and after school programs? What does all of that look like? And so these are really important for the community, but it is so individually based per person that these are the hard conversations you have at the beginning, and what they think a lot of times they want changes and evolves. And going through that process to discuss things, because I think it's just as important to know what you don't want as it is for what you want. And it really helps filter things down much quicker.
Well, and to not fall in love with the house until you know that you're going to have all of those other things that, as I'm listening to you talk, I'm like, of course, those are the more important things. Like you can be happy in a lot of houses would be my guess in most situations. But if your kids aren't in a school that is what you want to be able to give them, that's not something that you can very easily look past. Because you get one shot at providing a great experience for your kids and future and all of that. Now, of course, you can move, but you have to move enough in the physician training journey. I don't think many physician families want to move any more than they absolutely have to.
No, and then that's where it comes back to that initial question, what's your goal? Because it's seasons of life, change the things you need in life. And so those are things we kind of look at the big picture for areas and houses and your needs. And then again, obviously we can't predict what's going to happen in the future. But it's really going to encompass all of those things that are important to them, including community.
Well, and I know too, this is true in a lot of communities I know, and this is certainly true in Nashville, but there are certain places where someone's goal around schooling and where they might buy the house means that they're going to be looking at private schools, not public schools. There are other areas where they could be looking at public schools and that could fit their needs. And so I think that all goes into kind of the budget discussion as well, because if you have 2, 3, 4 kids that you're going to be putting into private school, we have to think about that demand on your cash flow and factor that in when we're thinking about how much money can go into a mortgage payment versus if you're somewhere where those goals that you have can be met by the public school, then you might have a little bit more room to wiggle in the budget for the house because we don't have as big of a line item there for kids' activities and support.
Yep, I agree. And I think that also helps filter out your search for homes when you are factoring in all of those. And then that will dictate, okay, do I have enough cash flow for repairs, a fixer upper? Do I need to be looking at new construction? Because maybe they will be offering incentives that I wouldn't be getting in a resale. So those kind of conversations will help with the budget.
Or even thinking about, because I'm thinking about if you don't know the local area, I mean, there are certain situations, especially in like cities, property taxes can be very expensive versus maybe if you just go over the county line into the next county, property taxes can be measurably less. And so thinking about like putting all of that together, like I'm imagining kind of this big, it's bigger than a Venn diagram, but there's like a big diagram of, what's important and kind of where all of those things intersect. And I'm getting overwhelmed just thinking about it. So thank goodness for you.
It is big. And then you start talking about being in city limits, outside of city limits, what that looks like for the things that you want in a community, restrictions versus non-restrictions. And so it can snowball very quickly.
So I'm curious too. I'm thinking a doctor that I was working with recently who is moving to town and they asked their network for some realtor recommendations. And of course they got some names, friend of friend and things like that. In watching them kind of go through their experience in their first house they had under contract, they ended up backing out because there were some issues. And so it was a whole thing. And part of me is curious what having maybe a different realtor from the get-go could have, like how that could have changed that experience and maybe made it a little bit less stressful on them. So I'm curious from your perspective, what should specifically a physician family be looking for in a real estate agent? What questions should you be asking before, like it's tempting to just have a phone call with someone and be like, yeah, she seems great. Let's do it. And I think there's more to it than that.
I think it's really helpful if they've kind of walked the walk. So they understand the behind the scenes of how this process works, what schedules will look like, because 90% of the time I am dealing with the spouse or the partner. Do they have any flexibility? We have brought closings up to the hospital in between surgeries for people to close. We have done tons of things remotely. So if a lot of it is done remotely, you need to have somebody that knows the way that this process would work and have the great resources specific for the physicians, but also resources for within the community so that they can also ask fellow physician families, hey, here's where we're moving from. Can you help me with X, Y, and Z? And so it's this family that bleeds into each other and they're like, I understand how you feel. That's how I felt. And here's what you need. And so we've built this community where it is a social media platform for them to ask a lot of questions as well. And they have fellow physician families answering because they just did it themselves. So I do think it's helpful when you understand that, and then you can tap into various resources specific for them. But, specific questions that I think is, it's different having a realtor that specializes in relocation, especially from out of state, versus they are just used to having their clients that are local. It's a really, really big difference. Relocation is hard, especially when somebody's limited on time. So how do you do that remotely? And so that's a big thing I think is helpful. What resources do you have? And just kind of chat with them to see if the vibe fits, and do they have the resources specific for your family and then specific for your lifestyle too. I think makes a big difference. Trust your gut. That's what I always tell people when you start interviewing people, getting their experience, looking up reviews. I feel like they understand a lot of the background of what you came from and how you live if you find someone that's in the middle of it.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And probably just straight up asking if they've worked with physician families before and what that experience has been like for them and how they support physician families. Because if they can't answer that question I would say pretty clearly without much thought, then they probably don't have a lot of experience in that realm.
Having the experience not only working with a specific lender that works with physicians, insurance companies, disability, all the things that you don't think about, having a connection with an attorney that reads through contracts. Like a lot of physicians don't understand they can actually have negotiations straight out at the beginning, and having these appropriate connections for them specific for physicians, I think speaks volumes.
Yeah. Well, you're speaking my language there. And that's where I guess we'll tease. I'll be on your podcast in not too long. Yeah. And we'll talk about all of those things because those are all things we help with.
I know you do.
The negotiation, the insurance coverages you need in place.
I love it.
But absolutely knowing all of those things and thinking about it. Big real estate transitions are big life transitions, whether you're relocating to a new area, whether you're upgrading a house, whether you're, whatever that looks like, downsizing because you've headed into retirement. There's usually some sort of change in your life that precipitates the change in real estate. And so I think being able to think about, okay, what else is connected to this? And how do I make sure that I'm thinking through all of it? There's so much overwhelm that can come with that. I love that you're planting those seeds and finding those good partners. I love your suggestion. Like I was almost thinking of, I know everywhere we lived growing up, there was always some kind of physician alliance group or, house staff alliance or something like that, where the spouses were able to find some community. And so I know a lot of those will have kind of a new, a new resident kind of guidebook or a welcome kind of committee or whatever. And so reaching out to some of those organizations and then asking for their best recommendations, who's working with the physician families in that group. I think that probably could serve you really well.
I agree. And I think it's comforting immediately for the physician when they're moving in. I have a relo guide specific for physicians, but the thing that they always love the most is I did a survey of all past clients of rate on a scale of 1 to 5, where you live, the safety, the schools, the commute, all of that. And so as soon as they're coming, they were like, I don't know anything about the area. And I said, it's okay. Right here, these are what all the physicians are saying about these areas. What fits your needs best?
Yeah. And it's from other families just like theirs who are saying, this is a great neighborhood. This is a great, because I know one of the things that's hard to figure out is like, are there other families in this neighborhood? I had a client, this was again, years and years ago, but it was one of those things that I thought, that's so interesting. And I bet they're not the only ones. They bought a house that they loved. And it turns out that the subdivision was all like retirees. People had lived in these houses for a really long time. And so they're like, we either have to live here for a while. They had young kids and wait for this to transition, these families to relocate and younger families to buy these houses, or we're going to have to sell this house and move to a subdivision now that we know the area where there are families with young kids because we want our kids to grow up with playmates in the neighborhood. And so that's like, thinking about what you want in that community and having someone who can help you find that, or other physician families who say, yeah, this is a great place to have a family with young kids is huge.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Well, is there anything, we could obviously talk about, there's so many intricacies in real estate and all of that. We could probably go on for much longer than our listeners have time to hear us talk through today. But is there anything that's big that I've missed that you're like, no, physicians need to hear this?
No, I think you hit on all topics. I think the biggest thing for them, my two takeaways would be start early. As soon as you find out you're going to be moving, get as much information as you can. Look on social media for these particular Facebook pages, Instagram for certain hashtags for, local real estate, for physician relocation. So you can start asking questions. You can start being part of the communities. So I would definitely start early. And then the other thing is, really know your goals so that way you can decide, is renting versus buying what is right for me? And you'll know when you're with the right realtor, when they're not pressuring you, but they're actually talking to you about your goals and trying to figure out a game plan for you.
I love that. That's huge, because if you feel like maybe renting is the way that you need to go and you have an agent that is really pushing a purchase, then obviously you know that they're not leading with your goals first. And I agree with you. There is so much that's entangled in physician finance. Like, you have to have someone who's on your team, who's going to work with you, because that's going to get you the most out of the bigger picture of life. Longtime listeners to the show know that we always end on the same question, which is hitting on our topic of wealth that matters. And so this, for you, kind of asking this as a physician spouse, I'm really interested in how you will answer this compared to a lot of our guests on the show are physicians themselves. There's probably a lot of overlap in the answers, but you have a very different perspective. And so I'm interested in hearing, the idea of wealth that matters is that only part of your wealth is financial. There are so many other things that amount to a wealthy life. It's having time, it's having relationships, it's having health, it's so much more. And so what we believe here at Vestia is if we only focus in on your financial wealth, we've kind of missed the point. And I think doctors in particular are it's always like they always do more, right? It's what makes them so amazing at what they do. They're so committed. They're so achievement oriented. They're so giving of themselves. They're so committed. But over time, what can happen is you forget about everything that's not work and ultimately then money. And so I'm curious, especially from your position as a physician spouse, working with so many physician families, what does wealth that matters mean to you?
So for me, I'm going to answer this from a personal perspective. Wealth that matters for me is time. I look at time as wealth, and time with your family, time well spent with your spouse, obviously time that you're investing into your business. But when we started this journey in medicine, we decided that we were going to invest whatever time we could. And, time is so limited, especially during training, especially from the physician aspect. So we kind of shifted our mindset to, all right, whatever that time was, if it was 10 minutes of a coffee, if it was, 10 minutes before you're going to bed, like we really focused on that time. And it wasn't what we didn't have, but it's like we have 10 minutes of undivided attention. And so that was what was wealth to us. And then over time, it has definitely grown with our what we're investing our time in with our family and with each other. And now that he is out of training, does have a little bit more flexibility and more time. So we're able to kind of shift what that time looks like. But for us, it's always been time.
I love that so much. I'm also having flashbacks to meeting my dad, my mom taking us to meet my dad in the hospital cafeteria for those 10 minutes that we were going to see him, maybe over 2 or 3 days, doing in-house call and all of that. I love that thought of quality over quantity and not thinking about what you don't have, which is maybe an abundance of time, but what you do have and how you make the most of that. I think that's such a helpful reframe. And I know there are so many physician families too who are maybe in the thick of training or the early years of practice who are like, is this going to get better? And so I think also hearing you say, now that your husband's been in practice for a long time, you have a little bit more control over that schedule, over that time. And so having built that foundation of meaningful moments of quality over quantity, and then being able to extend that into a little bit more quantity is really encouraging.
I say hang in there. The light is getting bigger and bigger at the end of the tunnel. It's just hard while you're in it.
I love that so much. Well, thank you, Amanda. Like I said, we could go on for a long time, but I think this has been a really great overview. And there will absolutely be physician families who listen to this who, even just in the how to ask questions and find a good realtor and what to think about in your community and your goals and all of that before you start looking at houses and falling in love with something that's not going to meet those goals is, I think, such good advice and is going to serve so many physicians so well. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for what you do for physician families. I think it's huge. And I just appreciate you and your time.
Absolutely. And to all of you for listening, thank you so much. Please do subscribe if you don't follow us so that you won't miss a single one of our episodes coming up. We have some great guests lined up that I'm recording with here soon that I'm very excited for you to hear from. So you will want to make sure that you get all of those updates.
Are you looking to hire a financial advisor with physician-specific expertise? At Vestia, we work exclusively with doctors, helping you navigate things like student loan repayment, reviewing RVU-based contracts, navigating practice buy-ins or private equity offers, optimizing retirement plans, designing tax-smart investment strategies, and planning for things like parental leave or early retirement. We have over 150 years of combined experience working with specialized physicians. So chances are, if you're thinking about it, we've helped another doctor through it. We built our firm around one goal: helping physicians achieve wealth that matters. Planning that's not just about numbers, but about designing the life you actually want to live. That means your wealth lets you live the life you imagined when you first started this journey. Time with your family, freedom in your schedule, and confidence in your decisions. Not sure how you're doing today? Head to vestiaadvisors.com/DEO, that's DEO for Doctor's Eyes Only, to take our 3-minute physician wealth checkup and get a snapshot of where you stand today and what to do next. Thank you for listening to the Doctor's Eyes Only podcast. We hope today's conversation advanced your journey to wealth that matters. Please make sure to follow and subscribe so you don't miss a single one of our amazing episodes we have coming up. See you next time. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Vestia Advisors, LLC. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. It should not be construed as legal or tax advice and is not intended to replace the advice of a qualified attorney or tax advisor. This information is not an offer or a solicitation to buy or sell securities. Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Before investing, you should consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses associated with investment products. Investment decisions should be based on an individual's own goals, time horizon, and tolerance for risk. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Diversification and asset allocation do not ensure a profit or guarantee against loss. Consult your financial professional before making any investments. Investment advisory services offered through Vestia Personal Wealth Advisors, Vestia Retirement Plan Consultants, and Vestia Advisors LLC. Securities offered through Osdale Financial Partners, Inc., 5187 Utica Ridge Road, Davenport, Iowa, 52807. Member, FINRA, SIPC. Vestia Personal Wealth Advisors, Vestia Retirement Plan Consultants, Vestia Advisors LLC, and Osdale Financial Partners, Inc. are independently owned and operated.